Today we are reviewing all subscription dog food services here in the UK. We will be putting them head to head and comparing and contrasting the different services. Now the first thing I want to say is that this video is not being sponsored by anybody. Now every single review I have seen of these services seems to be incentivized by the very companies who have paid or who give the reviewers a small commission in order for them to put the services in the best possible light. So I want to tell you straight away that this video hasn't been sponsored and this is just an honest take. Also later on in the video I am going to show you how you can actually save money with these services, so please stay tuned until later on in the video. Now we have a lot to cover. We are going to compare Butternut Box, Tuggs, Different Dog, Pure, Boost and Marleybones. I'm going to tell you whether these are good or not, what the pros are, what the cons are. I'm going to tell you if it's better than kibble. I'm going to tell you whether this is better than raw. I'm actually going to tell you whether it's cheaper to make your own food. I'm going to tell you how to save money with these services, and then we are going to close with some thoughts. Now we are going to start with Butternut Box, and the first piece of advice I will say is that you should always read the ingredients for everything you give your dog, irrespective of what any company whatsoever tells you with their marketing or on the front of any recipes. You should always turn the bag of food over and see what is what. So here Butternut Box say that we take the best quality ingredients that we can find, gently cook them at 90 degrees and quickly freeze them so that we can lock in the freshness without relying on any nasty preservatives. And that might be true, however we need to dig a little bit deeper, and so we are going to review 3 of the recipes. The first one is the chicken you out, which is the most popular recipe. The ingredients are human quality chicken, and that's 60%, and that comprises of chicken, chicken liver and chicken heart. So that for starters is really good. We like chicken as being the first ingredient and a high proportion of the recipe being chicken. That's really good. They don't only include chicken, but they also include chicken liver and chicken heart, and those are superfoods, are very valuable and really healthy for your dog, so that's really good. We then have carrots, and that's 15%. We get sweet potatoes 4%, peas 4 potatoes, cauliflower, lentils and more lentils are 4%, and broccoli at 2%. So what we see here is a 60-40 food. The thing I do not like is the amount of carbohydrates, the amount of fruits and vegetables that you get with these services. You want to be paying for as much meat as possible, and I do recognize that 60% might be higher than others. However, 15% carrots and then all the little 4% do add up to a lot of vegetables. So yes, we are looking roughly at 35 to 37% vegetables here, and that is on the high side. That is roughly a lot proportionally from the recipe. So yes, 60% is chicken. Now chicken will shrink when you cook it, and vegetables sometimes tend to expand whenever you cook them. So lentils or peas, for example, if you cook them, if you boil them, they might expand, so the 4% might be a little bit higher. So the amount of vegetables you get is on the high side. The next recipe we are going to get into is the pork this way. We get human quality pork, and that's 60%, and that's pork, pork heart and pork liver. Once again, this is really good. You not only get one single protein, the muscle meat, which is pork, but you also get pork heart and pork liver, which are superfoods that are extremely valuable for your dog. We then get into carrots 14%, red lentils 6%, butternut squash 6%, green beans 4%, cauliflower 4% and broccoli 3%. Again, 14% carrots in my opinion is a little bit high, and red lentils is 6%. So the filler here is on the high side, so 35 to 37% fruits or vegetables, in my opinion, is a little bit high. Let's review the Ready Steady Veggie. Now, the ingredients here are human quality vegetables, that's carrots, butternut squash, sweet potatoes, parsnips, green beans, cauliflower, broccoli, spinach, cottage cheese, split red lentils, and all other stuff. Now, the first thing to say to you is that your dog is a meat and bone eater, and dogs do not have something called amylase, which is an enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates in the mouth. Now, they do digest some carbohydrates internally just like we can, but they do struggle. So if you are going to put your dog on a vegetarian or a vegan diet, that goes against what they are designed to do. So I would altogether discard this recipe, and if your dog has any sort of sensitivities, you should watch our free seminars on dog nutrition and allergies and how you can solve it. Anytime someone claims that their dog is a lot better off on a vegan or vegetarian diet because of their sensitivities, we can actually solve the issue by putting them on a rare meat like reindeer, maybe goat, maybe sardine, maybe kangaroo, whatever the case might be. But in my opinion, you should not give your dog anything vegetarian. The last one we are going to go into is the You've Got game. So human quality game, that's 50%. And again, the first ingredient here is human quality game, and that's 50%. We get venison, duck liver, and duck heart. And in my opinion, this is a little bit misleading because duck liver and duck heart, even though they are really valuable, I wouldn't consider duck to be extremely high premium meat. Now, I would exclusively like to see venison here, and I would like to see 60% like the other recipes instead of 50%, but I do acknowledge that game, that venison, might be more expensive than chicken or beef because it's less available than those meats. So it is a bit of a disappointment that they sort of get into duck liver and duck heart and they don't just put venison across the board, but that is how it is. We then do not get a breakdown of the quantities of carrots, lentils, and butternut squash and beans, etc, etc. So this is likely to be like a 40 to 45% carbohydrates in the dog food. Now, we do not like the high amounts of fruits and vegetables in dog food. We want to be paying for meat. We want our pounds to be spent on meat and not filler, quote unquote, because if you go to a restaurant and they give you a lot of vegetables and very little meat, you are going to be a little bit miffed. And the same thing should apply to dog food services and dog food for that matter. So I do like the tidbits they include in every single recipe. They include the heart and the liver, and those are superfoods, and those are incredibly valuable for your dog, but I do not like the high amount of vegetables that they include, and I do not like sometimes that they reduce the amount of meat you get. The second subscription service we are going to look into is Tuggs, and we are going to review the cod crew here. So the cod crew includes fresh cod, and that's 40%. We then get a very novel protein, that's fresh insects, that's 20%. We then get sweet potato 10%, broccoli 11%, carrot 7%, etc, etc. Now, there are many levels of explanation of these ingredients. So we love fresh cod, and that can be a novel protein. Absolutely love that. Fresh insect is deemed to be a hypoallergenic, a true hypoallergenic protein. Now, it is very left field, and it can work for certain dogs. There are many pros and many cons of using something like insects. One of the cons, one of the most apparent drawbacks in my opinion, is that your dog would never ever eat an insect if they were left to their own devices. I mean, my dog has been with me for over 10 years and he has never ever pursued an insect. So it isn't in their natural food chain. So that is a really big indication, in my opinion, that insects aren't part of the biological diet. But nevertheless, sometimes if your dog is allergic to absolutely everything, this could sometimes perhaps work. I don't know. Again, sweet potato 10%, broccoli 11%, carrot 7%, and all the stuff. So here the filler, the vegetables are quite high, and I am not a fan of that. The second one is chicken coo, and here we have chicken 40%, and that's 25% heart, which is a muscle meat. The trimming is 14.18, liver 5.82%, and that is pretty good. I love the fact that they do break down heart, trimming, and liver. We then get again fresh insect, sweet potato almost 10%, broccoli almost 10%, carrots 9%, and then kelp and other tidbits like that. Now, the ingredients here tend to be very similar across the board, and again, the insect thing is a little bit baffling, because if your dog is having sensitivity issues, most likely your dog is going to be reactive to chicken or beef or some of the most common protein sources. So to put chicken and insects in the same recipe is a bit of a contradiction, in my opinion. What do I like about this recipe? I love 40% chicken. I am not a massive fan of the fresh insect at 20%, and then we get a lot of sweet potato, a lot of broccoli, and a lot of carrot, etc, etc. So once again, okay meat content, and in my opinion, a lot of vegetables. Third ingredient we are going to look at is the pork power, and here we have pork 40%. I love that. Heart 25%. The trimming is 9%, and the liver is almost 6%, and that is lovely. We then get into the cookie cutter fresh insect at 20%, sweet potato 11%, broccoli 14%. Broccoli is quite high there, in my opinion. Carrots almost 12%, and that's again quite high. So sweet potato, broccoli, and carrots, that's what, 30-35% of the recipe. That's a lot of vegetables in a fresh food service. We would like to see that 40% pork go to maybe 80% pork for this to be a premium food. The most novel thing about Tuggs here is the insect meal, and there are issues and arguments for and against insects, such as sustainability, lauric acid, sensitivities, or even allergies. But all in all, these recipes tend to follow in the footsteps of Butternut Box, or vice versa. They tend to be quite similar in the 60-40 fashion. Let's move on to pure pet food, and the first ingredient is going to be chicken with garden greens and strawberry pieces. So here the ingredients are chicken 53%, and that's really good. The first ingredient is chicken. They do not tell you about the other tidbits like the other subscription services in terms of like liver or whatever. They only say chicken, and that's 53%. We then get potato, and that's an undisclosed amount. We get dried egg, which is a source of protein, pretty good. Peas, okay, chicken stock, okay, carrot, linseed, broccoli, etc, etc. So I do not straight out of the bat like the potato as the second ingredient. Potato is a starch, is hard for dogs to digest. Same with peas, because they can cause a little bit of flatulence. Again, dogs struggle with large amounts of carbohydrates in their diets, something to do with their ability to make their own sugar from just protein and fat in a process called gluconeogenesis, and that means that they do not have any dietary requirement for carbohydrates. That means that they can digest carbohydrates, but they shouldn't be high in their diet. That's where that comes from. So the second ingredient being potato, not a fan of. Dried egg, that's okay. Peas, okay. Chicken stock, okay. Carrots, etc, etc. So these would be a little bit of a step down from the other two in my opinion. Let's look into the herring, and herring is with whitefish and a medley of garden greens. So the ingredients here is herring and whitefish, that's 43%. That's quite low, you know, so we have come from 60% and now this is 43%. That's quite low. The second ingredient is potato, the third ingredient is dried egg. We then have brown rice, and here is one of the ingredients we do not like here on this channel. I don't like rice in dog food because, once again, dogs struggle with starches, and even though brown rice is a bit more digestible than white rice, if you look at your dog's mouth cannot masticate. They cannot move their jaws sideways. And whenever you give your dog rice, your dog is going to get the rice absolutely everywhere, which is a very clear indication that you shouldn't be giving your dog rice because they haven't been very well equipped to chewing it and to breaking it down. And once again, they cannot break it down in their mouth. Whenever me and you eat rice, we can break it down in the mouth because we have the enzymes to do it. Dogs do not have these enzymes, so I don't like brown rice in recipes. So this would be a very, very big no from me. Let's look at the salmon here, and this is with sweet strawberries and courgettes. By the way, I hate courgettes, but that's my personal pet peeve. We have salmon, and that's 33%. That's even lower than the previous recipe. Potato, okay. Dried egg, okay. Peas, coconut, dry stock, carrots, etc., etc. So I am not a fan of this because the higher the quality of the protein and the more expensive the protein, like herring or salmon, the less we get in the recipe. So we might get a bit more chicken or a bit more turkey maybe in the recipes, but whenever we select the quote-unquote the more expensive meats like salmon, and you can do this in your local supermarket, salmon is always going to be more expensive than chicken. That doesn't mean that whenever you eat, you are going to eat a lot less salmon than you'll eat chicken, and that you should put a lot more vegetables with salmon than chicken. You should always have the same sort of protein intake in your diet, and the same, in my opinion, should apply to your dog. Again, the second ingredient being potato here, I am not a fan of, and because we don't know how much potato we are getting in pure pet food, I am really not a fan of these recipes because we want traceability. We want to see whether the potato is 30% or the potato is 5% of the recipe. And because they do not tell you, they don't disclose it, then we don't know. We do not know what we are giving our dog. So pure pet food, that's something you probably need to fix. So Marleybones, we are going to take a look at the Chick Nosh chicken, and is British chicken, that's 60%. We then get carrots 6.5%, peas 4%, quinoa 3%, and broccoli 1.3%. Now the trick here is in the quinoa and the carrots. Whenever you boil quinoa, that 3% is going to be a lot higher than anything else, and it's going to expand a lot more than you might think. I mean, you can do this with quinoa, you can do this with couscous, you can do this with rice. So British chicken, I like that. Again, carrots and peas and quinoa, that seems to be on the high side. What I don't really understand here is where the other percentages come from. So we get British chicken, that's 60%, carrots 6.5%, peas 4%, and quinoa 3%, broccoli 1.3%. The rest do not add up to 100%. So what ingredients are we not being told about? Because 60 and 6.5 and 4% and 3% and 1.3% and 0.8% and whatever do not add up to 100%. So what is the rest? Is it just water? Is it just nothing? They should probably disclose any other ingredients they put in the food, because something here doesn't really add up, and it cannot add up maybe like 5%, because that could be like the crude ash, but anything else seems to be a little bit suspicious. It could be nothing, it could be absolutely nothing, but I have been around the block long enough for me to identify something I don't like. The second recipe we are going to take a look at is the Posh Nosh salmon, and here the ingredients are salmon 42% and whitefish 18%, so that's a high proportion of meat. That's about 66.7%, and we then get carrots and peas and quinoa, broccoli 1.3%. Just like with the other recipe, the sums here do not really add up. We have 66.7 in terms of meat, but then the rest of the percentages do not add up to 100%. So I would like Marleybones maybe to break down the whole thing a little bit better. The last one here we are going to take a look at is the Lush Nosh lamb, and here is British lamb is 60%, and then we get on the standard carrots 6.5%, sweet potato 4%, quinoa 3%. Again, high proportion of meat, but the other ingredients I am not sure about. I'm really not sure about. I'll probably give them a call if you want to use this service. I have no idea. Now, with all these subscription services, moisture is going to be quite high and is going to trump a lot of the protein or a lot of the crude protein content you see, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that you cannot compare dry dog food to wet food or to cook food, because the ratios are all going to be distorted. So I would probably prod them and ask them a few more questions, because there are things that do not simply add up, but again, I could be wrong. Let's look at Boost, and the first recipe we are going to take a look at is the tender beef with superfoods, and here we have freshly prepared beef, that's 60%, beef mince 30%, beef tripe 20%, beef heart 10%, and beef liver 10%. That's really good. 70% is a very high proportion of meat. We then have carrots 9%, sweet potato 6%, kale 5%, and peas 4%. Tapioca starch, which is not my favorite ingredient in pet food. Tapioca starch is a high inflammatory ingredient. Now, if it's a tiny proportion of the recipe, I don't like it, but it's one of the yellow or red flags in pet food, and I do not like it. It's mainly used to bind things together. It's a starch, which means that it's going to put everything and get everything together, to stick together, to give it a bit more consistency, but I am not a fan. There's a couple ingredients here that I'm not really sure about. The first one is dry chicory root, and they say it's a source of fructooligosaccharides, and fructooligosaccharides is a derivative of sugar. And I am not a fan of fructooligosaccharides in pet food, because they help the food be a bit more palatable, but it also gets the dogs addicted to the sugar, and I am not a fan of anything extra in dog's food. Now, I do understand obviously that broccoli is going to get converted into sugar, into glucose within the liver and the pancreas of the dog, but fructooligosaccharides is a bit out there. So I would probably inquire about this fructooligosaccharides, because yes, it can be a source of fiber. Chicory root can be a source of fiber, and it's something quite prevalent in pet food sometimes, but the fructooligosaccharides I am really not a fan of, unless they come out and say something else, but I'm not a fan. The second recipe is chicken, and we have freshly prepared chicken, that's 70%, phenomenal, chicken breast 31%, chicken heart 27%, muscle meat, chicken liver 10%, a bit high in my opinion. Chicken liver should only comprise about 5% of the overall recipe, and then we have chicken mince, that's 2%, sweet potato 6%, carrots 6%, kale 5%. Again, tapioca starch, not the biggest fan of tapioca starch. And we then go into the fructooligosaccharides, which again, the question is out there, and you might be okay with it and they might be okay with it. They might say it's amazing and they might well be amazing. I don't like fructooligosaccharides in my dog's food. Let's look at the turkey meal for working dogs. And here we have turkey 40%. They don't really specify one way or another. It's just turkey 70%. Carrots 5%. Broccoli 5%. Vitamin. What vitamin is it? Okay, we get vitamins down here, and then sweet potato powder 1.5%. And here we seem to have the ingredients a bit more streamlined. There aren't as many ingredients as the others, so this could be an indication that these range might be a little bit better than the others, because the fewer ingredients sometimes in the food, the better it's going to be. You don't want a dog food with 54 ingredients. You want a food with maybe 5 to 10 ingredients. They're all traceable. You know all the percentages for every single ingredient, and everything is wonderful, and that way you know what you're giving your dog. If you have too many ingredients, that's just too many ingredients. Let's look at different dogs, shall we? The first recipe is the pork ragu, and here we have pork, mince 30%, heart 25%, and liver 5%. We have kale, which is a dark green, spinach, suede, and beetroot, seasonal berry, bananas and mushrooms, and salmon oils, etc., etc. Again, we have a high proportion of meat, and then we have a 30 to 35% carbohydrates, vegetables, greens, fruits, whatever the case might be. There is very little difference between all these brands, in my opinion. The second one is the braised beef, which sounds absolutely wonderful. The ingredients are beef, mince 30%, heart 25%, and liver 5%. Spinach 14%, that's high in spinach. Carrot, undisclosed amount. Squash, apple, mushrooms, etc., etc. Again, high in beef, but also high in spinach, high in carrots, high in squash, etc., etc. The next recipe we are going to look at is the chicken casserole, which again, these names are absolutely incredible. We have mince 55% and liver 5%. Love the addition of liver, by the way. We get red cabbage 14%, that's high in my opinion. Carrots, okay. Sweet potato, okay, it's a low glycemic carbohydrate, much better than potato, but still we don't know the actual percentage here. The percentages here are all over the place in most of these recipes and most of these brands. We sometimes do not know what actual percentage of the food we are getting our dog. For example, here we have red cabbage, and that's 14%. So we know that cabbage is 14% of the recipe. Well, how about the carrots? What about sweet potato? What percentage of carrots and what percentage of sweet potato am I giving my dog? I should be able to know, and by me not knowing, then that's a bit deceiving in my opinion. I should be able to know every single percentage there is. But let's look at shepherd's pie, see if I'm wrong. I don't know. Lamb 60%, again, mince, heart and liver, wonderful. Suede 15%, a bit high. Red cabbage, we don't know. Cauliflower, we don't know. Pear 5%. So we know suede 15%, but red cabbage and cauliflower we do not know. What we want to do with everything we give our dog is traceability. We want to know how much of each ingredient they are getting, because otherwise the manufacturer is going to have the license to put whatever they want of whatever they deem appropriate or whatever it's available in the recipe, and we want to hold our manufacturers accountable. That's what we want. So what are the pros here? The pros are it's pretty convenient. You literally sign up to a subscription and you get a box delivered to your door every now and then, and that's really good. The cons is they all seem to be pretty high in the vegetables and the fruits. Yes, 60% is high in meat, but the 35% seems to be high for the price. The price is a little bit high when you factor the amount of fruits and vegetables you get in the recipes. So is this better than kibble? Well, the answer, it depends. It really does depend. There are kibbles that are absolutely atrocious. There are kibbles that start with 67% rice. There are kibbles with wheat, barley, corn, gluten. We have meat and animal derivatives. We have straight sugar, and those aren't good at all. We have potato protein in a lot of dog foods and a lot of dry dog foods, and those are really poor. However, we also have 80-20 foods where 80% is meat and 20% are carbohydrates. Your sweet potatoes, your broccolis, your apples, your pears, whatever. And those kibbles, in my opinion, are a lot better than these subscription services. You get more value for your money. You get something that's a lot better in terms of the amount of meat you get in the recipe, and you get a lot less filler. So you are compromising here the quote-unquote freshness, even though all these recipes seem to be cooked, with the price you pay. So it is a bit of a balancing act. If you are coming from some of the lowest quality kibbles on the market and you put your dog on this, of course your dog is going to be a lot better off because some of the ingredients here are really good. However, if you are downgrading from a really good kibble, I don't think you are going to be a lot better off. You are going to be paying more money and you are not going to reap the rewards of this food. And by the way, anything, absolutely anything, is better than prescription vet diets. So if you look on the back of any prescription vet diets, you are going to see a lot of wheat gluten, a lot of rice, a lot of corn. You are going to see maize. You are even going to see sugar in veterinary prescription diets. You're going to see animal fats and meat and animal derivatives, and those are horrible ingredients for your dog. So if your question is this better than veterinary prescription diets? The answer is almost anything is better than veterinary prescription diets. The next common question we get all the time is this better than raw? No, it isn't better than raw. However, we have to caveat that because certain brands of raw food are absolutely bonkers in the amount of carbohydrates and fruit and veg they put in the recipes. We see a lot of raw food manufacturers putting up to 50% fruits and vegetables in the diet. In the raw food community, there roughly seems to be two camps. The straight 80-10-10s, where 80% is meat, 10% is offal, of which 5% is liver, and then 10% is bone. And this camp do not add any fruits or vegetables whatsoever. Remember that dogs do not require any carbohydrates whatsoever to live and to make their own energy. So this camp thinks that. The other camp doesn't mind some fruits or vegetables because of the potential nutrients and the benefits that certain fruits or vegetables can have on their dog's health. However, these tend to be limited to maybe 5, 10, maybe 15% at a push. But if you get into a raw food that is 30% carbohydrates, that's 50% fruits and vegetables, then no. Then these foods and these subscription services are going to be either equal to raw food or they are going to be better even. But in principle, if you are choosing a good quality raw food will always be best. It's very minimally processed. It hasn't been cooked. It contains bone. It contains all the nutrients and vitamins your dog needs, and is arguably the most biologically appropriate for your dog. Now, we can have a very separate conversation about whether raw is for you and it suits your lifestyle and you like handling raw meat and you know what to give your dog whenever you move to raw. So that is a completely different conversation to the topic, is this better than raw dog food? And if the raw food is good, then no, nothing in theory is better than raw food. Now, is it cheaper to make your own dog food? And this is a bit of a minefield, because we see so many people come through our doors and in our consultations, and the amount of people that do not understand the requirements for their dog is absolutely staggering. We see people only give their dogs chicken breast or rice or just mince, or they do not put any offal, they do not give their dog any bone or whatever. And those people, what they're doing is they are doing their dogs a really massive disservice, because if you do not inform yourself about the best diet for your dog, how is your dog going to be healthy in the first place? So is it cheaper to make your own? Yes, technically it would be a lot cheaper to make your own dog food. However, you have to inform yourself as to how to do it. And by the way, we have an easy DIY recipe book. It only costs 20 quid and is packed with natural recipes that you can actually provide for your dog. They are complete, they are balanced, and they are arguably the gold standard whenever it comes to natural recipes and DIY dog food, and you can get it in the link below. So yes, it is cheaper to make your own, but if you are going to make your own dog food, what you need to do is inform yourself. Now, how would I save money with these services? Well, you see, all these companies are trying to get you to buy. They follow you with ads wherever you go. Every single social media influencer within the pet food industry has a discount code, and they follow you and retarget you wherever you go on the web. So I would literally play their own game and go from discount to discount to discount to discount. If they are willing to give you a 50% off onboarding subscription, or a 40% off, or 25% off, or whatever, why should you pay full price? You shouldn't pay full price. You can go from one subscription to another subscription, to another subscription, to another subscription. And whenever they want to hook you back in, if they then offer you another 40-50% discount code, then take that. Then do not pay full price. If they are willing to discount their services so heavily, that just means that they do not see the value in you paying full price. So why should you pay full price if they are giving you all these discounts? Play them. As some words to conclude the video, what I would say is that yes, the protein content might be high, but the amount of filler you get is quite high as well. And for everything you give your dog, you should always read the ingredients, and you should always check out what you are giving them. And it is very likely that if you have considered any of these subscription services, maybe raw has always been on your radar. But the thing is, you might not know how to make your own raw food, or you might not know why you should switch to raw. And if you are really curious about it, you should really watch this video next. Is one better than the other? Well, aside from those subscription services that we have reviewed, where the protein content is a lot lower than the others, there isn't all that much in terms of difference between them. Yes, we do have insects sometimes in the recipes, and that could be a mark of differentiation, but at the same time, insects might not be what you want to be giving your dog, because as we said, they aren't all that biologically appropriate, so you might be wanting to stay away from them. In terms of which one is best, it's a bit of a commodity really. So which one is best? Is Sainsbury's better than Tesco? Is Morrison's better than M&S? In my opinion, in my honest opinion, if they were so good and so different from each other, they wouldn't offer so many steep discounts. I mean, if they are willing to go the extra mile and to onboard you with everlasting discounts and to heavily discount their prices, then why are they trying to do it? Is it because they are truly different? Is it because they are truly wonderful and because they are unique? Or is it because there isn't all that much in terms of differentiation and they just want to hook you as a customer? All these services seem to be very, very on par with each other, and they follow in the same footsteps of one another. They are trying to essentially compete and offer you the same product. Yes, they might give you butternut squash instead of carrots. They might give you a leafy green instead of potato, but at the end of the day, the 60-40 recipe seems to be very, very universal across the board. So there isn't anything to differentiate these services. I mean, what do you think? Have you had any experiences with any of them? Do you rate any of them? Do you rate one more than the other? If you have made it to the end, please do like, subscribe. We have so many videos on gastrointestinal issues, dog allergy issues. We have different seminars on pancreatitis, diabetes, and free information that is designed to help you and your dog live a much, much happier life.